Coming to you from the mobile Hudson Media Group studio, right here in the Uribe compound, this is Talking Politics, and I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, top 100 Latino via the Latino Spirit Online magazine, and certainly the sworn enemy of all the local latte liberals, toxic progressives, social justice clowns, and all the woke fools throughout Hudson County and even throughout the state of New Jersey. Yes, it's me, Fernando Uribe. Hope you're all doing well. As always, there is a lot to discuss, so let's get started. Here's what I'm thinking about right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it as long as air can run through my lungs. And you know what? The liberal media continues to do us an immense disservice, not just on a national level, but more specifically here in the state of New Jersey. And I'll get to the usual culprits in just a moment, but let me just give you some details about a story that should really outrage you, and if not outright concern you, about what's going on in today's political climate. Now, based on a Freedom of Information Act that was filed last year, there is some video footage now being made available about what the Biden administration is doing by flying in illegals into this country and dropping them off in different airports. So it was reported that, let me just start by saying that, while Joe Biden and, drunken Nancy, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, seem to want to go all out to protect the sovereignty of Ukraine, right? For whatever reason, the sovereignty of this country is the least of their priorities. And of course, what they're doing, along with many on the left in Congress, is orchestrating what I would argue is an outright invasion into this country. Now, apparently it's been reported that 2 million illegal immigrants from dozens of countries all crossed over the southern border from Mexico last year. And of course, the Biden administration is facilitating the cartel's people smuggling operation really at taxpayers' expense. Now, under the cover of darkness, though, every night, apparently, the federal government has been transporting illegals as fast as it can get away from the border itself on secret charter flights into unsuspecting communities all across the United States. This past week, it was reported on various news outlets that up north, just a little bit, a few miles from here, in Westchester Airport, which is a small airport, not as big as the other ones in the area, apparently they've been doing that. And officials have been lying and obstructing the very few journalists that are trying to expose this very same problem. Now, folks, this is nothing short of outright betrayal to the American people. So for a guy that supposedly got 81 million votes and is right now polling somewhere in the 30 percentile, you like what you voted for? How's that ROI, that return on investment for not seeing mean tweets anymore, right? Well, that's what's been going on, right? Whether it's in Westchester Airport or in other parts of the country. Now, again, body cam footage has been obtained via a Freedom of Information Act that was filed. And when you look at the video, folks, and you look at the audio, obviously it's available on YouTube and other news outlets, you should be horrified. And this is a story that should be covered, not just by Fox News and Newsmax, like two legitimate, reputable organizations, but do you think that garbage networks like CNN and MSNBC and garbage publications like the New York Times or the Washington Post would dare even write about this? Of course not, because they're in on the act as well with Sleepy Joe and the rest of the left in Congress. But folks, again, that should outrage you and that should bother you, because at the end of the day, we're flying in millions of illegals into various communities all across the country, obviously here in the New York, New Jersey area, right? Who's to say they're not trickling down across the river, coming into New Jersey, or coming down Route 95 or taking the George Washington Bridge into New Jersey? Who knows, folks? But you know what? The video is there. It's not me engaging in hysteria. It's me engaging in facts, and the video evidence is there. So you would think that a story like this would generate more attention, but you wouldn't know that. Again, the liberal media doesn't want to talk about it, and much less the liberal media here in New Jersey. And of course, folks, it's always the usual suspects. The Lollipop Guild. You're right, Uncle Dave from NJTV, Maxie Pizarro from Insider NJ, little JJ Lassiter also from Insider NJ, and even Tommy Boy with the Star Ledger. So again, I'll sort of dissect each member of the Lollipop Guild individually, because again, it's not just them. I don't want to just single them out, but other liberal journalists in New Jersey are doing this an immense disservice, because this is a story that you should be writing about, okay? But you don't see that on those news sites I just mentioned. You'll see some columns, you'll see, discussion about upcoming municipal elections. I get it, they're important. If you live near them and you're a political junkie like me, yeah, folks, that's interesting reading. But at the end of the day, something like this, where, let's be honest, folks, what illegals do is bring about a burden onto our communities. They overfill our classrooms, right? And as if teachers in our school districts aren't overworked enough, now you're getting classrooms at a much bigger capacity with more kids, because why? Illegals are crossing the border and bringing their kids illegally here as well. So what? It's a burden on our school district. It's a burden on social services in our communities. But you know what? When you talk to people on the left, they couldn't care less. All they're about is compassion. And more so even now, they're not seeing mean tweets anymore. And that's really all that matters to these intellectually bankrupt individuals. You know the types, right? Like Patricia Campos Medina, right? That insufferable socialist activist who doesn't know a lick about economics. But I bet you anything, folks, if you asked her to run a hot dog stand, you would think it's like deer in headlights. I mean, I would hate to see how this woman balances her checkbook. I mean, I just cringe at the thought, right? Or even Amy Torres, the executive director of the, New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, another insufferable left-wing crybaby bleeding heart group. That's another woman who probably couldn't even balance her checkbook, much less understand economics. And you can tell by listening to her rhetoric when it comes to how we coddle illegals and how we need to just give money away at all turns, right? It's these sort of activists that should drive you crazy. I know they drive me crazy, and I love denouncing them because they give me so much ammunition. But more so, folks, it should be journalists that are going after women like this or these bad policies. But you wouldn't know that, right? Again, you have someone like Uncle Dave Cruz. And folks, you know what? Listen, let's be very honest. Has there ever been a worse downgrade on a news channel like NJTV than when we had Michael Aaron gracing our televisions for years? And the eloquence and the integrity and just the outright character of Michael Aaron that we used to watch on NJTV, whether it was on Reporters Roundtable or, other segments that he would host. What a downgrade for NJTV and New Jersey Spotlight. To have this clown, yes, folks, he's a clown, okay? Nobody panders worse in this state, and especially in media, than David Cruz. And I don't want to hear anyone tell me, oh, well, Fernando, he's on NJTV. He must be doing something right. Folks, there's trash and garbage on CNN every night. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're good talent. Right? Don Lemon, right? We got George Costanza, Brian Stelter, right? On CNN. We have Andy Cooper, the rest of the garbage on those channels. So don't come at me with, oh, well, he's on NJTV, so they must be, doing something right, or he must be doing something right for the channel to keep him on the air. That's not the case, folks. Again, there's garbage everywhere in the liberal media. So you're not telling me anything. Okay? Or maybe even Maxi Pizarro, right? Who, here's a 60-something-year-old man continuing to write really irrelevant columns in New Jersey media. Yeah, he's covering municipal elections or whatever the other gaga, keeps him perpetually erect. But folks, at the end of the day, the story I just mentioned to you, something like this, and the impact of illegal immigration and the impact it's having on our communities, that's what journalists should be writing about. I'm the only journalist in New Jersey talking about it. I'm the only journalist with the spine and the integrity to discuss this and expose it for what it is, right? The aforementioned guys don't do that. Right? I mean, look at David Cruz's, Twitter page, for example. You think he'd be maybe referencing articles like this, or again, he's all about the Freedom of Information Act, right? And exposing things. Well, why don't you expose this, Uncle Dave? No, but instead, you look at his Twitter page and he's, engaging in nostalgia about some cop show from the 1990s. Really, Dave? I mean, you got nothing better to tweet about? And the same thing with Max. He's another clown who, for whatever reason, isn't writing about anything meaningful. And the same thing with Jay Lassiter. All right, he's another one. Little JJ wants to, menstruate because, they're not making weed more accessible in New Jersey. Well, boo-hoo. I'm sorry. You'll have to keep getting your stash from, the local lady down the block or wherever you live. I mean, since you live in down South Jersey in Bumble F, maybe getting weed for you is a little more laborious. That's not really my concern, bro. And I get it. You love weed and you want to perpetuate this narrative about, how important marijuana is. Well, it is to you. It's not to me. I've never smoked marijuana. I don't care to. It's not high on my priority list. I know it's high for you. And you want to have temper tantrums when you write columns about, oh my God, we're not working on weed fast enough. Folks, there's a lot more important stuff going on in New Jersey than accommodating, potheads like little JJ that glorify smoking weed. It's not like I'm slandering him. He himself glorifies smoking weed. So I'm not saying anything that's not factually true. You can look at his social media in terms of how much of an advocate he is when it comes to marijuana. But instead of writing about the story I just mentioned, he goes off on these tangents about whether or not marijuana isn't, being codified quicker or whatever. Or even Tommy Boy, Tom Moran, that lives in the People's Republic of Montclair. Again, folks, it's the Lollipop Guild that doesn't cover stories like this because at the end of the day, they cost our communities, not just financially, but socially. But you know what? Should you be surprised? Because when it comes to the liberal media, not just nationally, but here in New Jersey, folks, they do us a disservice each and every day. And I get it that people want to say, well, you know what? Oh, this person's a household name and that person's a household name. Well, you know what, folks? Garbage, that's a household name too. And you know what? It stinks when it gets old also. And you know what? That's something to think about when we're looking at the liberal media here in New Jersey and the disservice that they're doing us. You don't believe me? Look it up. But trust me, when you sort of go through the layers, you know that as usual, I'm pretty much right on what I'm telling you. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. In the latest edition of the 5-time award-winning podcast, Talking the Hudson, which you can listen to every single week via www.blogtalkradio.com/talkingthehudson, was my regularly scheduled monthly guest, Hudson County Democratic Organization Chairwoman and the new Councilwoman at Large in Jersey City, Amy DeGise. We spoke for over an hour on a multitude of different topics, and here are some highlights for your consideration. First, we talked about the candidacy of Robert Menendez Jr. as he is looking to fill a House seat recently retired by Albio Cirez. Amy had a lot to say about Rob Jr.'s candidacy and what he will mean to the House of Representatives. Let's check out what Amy had to say.
Well, we all know that at the start of the year, well, really maybe a little bit before the new year, Amy, the biggest political story in Hudson County was the imminent retirement of U.S. Representative Albio Cirez, right here in Hudson County in the 8th Congressional District. Sure enough, right after Albio announced his retirement, and listen, kudos to Albio, Amy, because he was kind of transparent in his statement that he put out. He was very much honest and said, listen, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but he had no desire to serve in a Republican House, which seems almost inevitable at this point, based on what we're seeing, not with polling, because polling, I don't believe in polling, but it seems like maybe Albio saw the tea leaves, talking to insiders. Obviously he's a member of Congress. He's going to hear things. He's going to talk to people. And he probably felt, and there was some whispers that he was going to not run again after 2024, that he would run again this year and then maybe one more term. That's not the case. He announced his retirement, and right after his retirement, everyone pretty much mobilized around the candidacy of the son of U.S. Senator Robert Menendez Jr. I know Mayor Stack, State Senator Stack, was one of the first elected officials to endorse him, along with Mayor Turner. No surprise there, obviously, because of how closely he works with Albio. But soon enough, the dominoes fell, and everybody else and all the other endorsements, came along with yours, the HCDO. Some whispers that maybe Stephen Fulop and State Senator Stack were not happy about that immediate endorsement of Robert Menendez Jr., but they also got in line as well and also bestowed their endorsements. You kind of look at Albio suddenly retiring and now the elevation of Robert Jr. to run for that seat in the primary in June. When you first heard about it, what came to mind?
So, I've always had a good relationship with, Albio. He's been a longtime friend of the family, and a really good mentor and ally towards me. So it was definitely sad to hear that, he felt like his time was coming to an end. But there's a lot of, of talking in the HCDO and in other organizations too, like about building a bench, mentoring young people, and kind of passing the baton rather than it getting grabbed from you. And then your legacy just kind of going away and going down a drain. So I think that he did, the really respectable and honorable thing by prepping everyone and establishing what his priorities were in his last years and, and what he wanted his legacy to be and how he would want to bow out gracefully and say, I'm ready for retirement. I'm ready to enjoy this next stage of my life and leave a legacy and kind of pass it down to someone who will build upon it. And that didn't mean that he named anyone, but he wanted, a good candidate that was going to, bring in some new progressive or, kind of young democratic values but also build on the hard work and really understand his history and his timeline in Hudson County politics. So I really commend him for bringing us all on board and allowing us to celebrate him and his long-standing, relationship with the community and what he's wanted to do to improve upon it, and so we're so grateful to have his leadership. And it's sad to see him go, but really happy that he gets to do it on his own terms and, kind of sets up this framework. And, I have to give a huge shout out to, my friend on a personal level, but also, who's going to be a great candidate and, I think a great congressman too, Rob Menendez, who, was, trying to really put himself in a position that he would be considered and show a platform and build on that legacy that Albio is leaving us. And I think it was the front runner from the beginning, and did have support of really everyone. Like, it was not contested, and, even talking to unelecteds and GOTV groups and, little just focus groups, he's widely popular, and I know that that's odd for someone who's never really held an elected position, but, he's established himself so strongly here in Hudson, with his father, but also separated from his father as well on his own initiatives and platform points and his own work ethic as well. So he's going to be a phenomenal candidate. I really can't wait for this primary season. We had a really great time during his, Senator Menendez's campaign in 2018. We spent a lot of time on the campaign trail. We spent the entire election day together. We're at the PAP station in Journal Square, I think at 5:30 in the morning. And we didn't separate from each other to about midnight, and we were just delirious and exhausted. We've really grown to be good friends, and I really am excited for him.
Without question, Robert Menendez Jr. checks off a lot of boxes, and during the upcoming primary, I know the HCDO, as well as many sort of longtime registered Democrats, will mobilize around his candidacy. Secondly, we talked about Amy's new role as Councilwoman at Large in Jersey City. And you know what? I'm sure it's going to be quite the learning experience for her. And of course, yes, the easy part is running for the office. And now she has to get to work. And she totally embraces the challenge. Let's hear what Amy had to say about it.
Easy part, and I know we'll laugh when we say this, the easy part was running the campaign last year. Now the hard part begins. You got to legislate. You're on the city council. And I'm sure a lot of people aren't going to give you a lot of as they say, learning curve here. It's, a lot of people aren't going to maybe give you baby steps and say, well, Amy's new at this. No, you know how harsh people are. They're going to be harsh. They're going to want you to step up to the plate right away as you are, again, getting more familiar with the inner workings of the city council. It's still early on. I know you just had your first council meeting, if I'm not mistaken, I think, or first couple of ones already. What's in the agenda for 2022, not just on your plate, but what are you seeing as the biggest issues that face the city council in Jersey City this year?
So, knowing that the Jersey City Master Plan, is kind of being piloted throughout the community on feelings and feedback, I think that a lot of the issues will surround, sustainability, keeping businesses and families here, making sure that we have safe streets, bikeable streets, and that's probably one of the biggest issues here in Jersey City is bike lanes versus car spots, as funny as that sounds. So I think that there'll be a lot of redevelopment in areas that are already kind of established. For a long time we saw redevelopment in areas that were abandoned or just huge vacant lands. I think we're going to go into seeing places that are already established and redesigning them. So, you have to work with the community stakeholders. You have to maintain the culture of the community, but then you also have to kind of bring it up to date, fund it, and keep it, funded for a long time. So Jersey City is looking at, creative uses of funding. They're looking to hire grant writers, which, is, a long time overdue, because the state and the federal government, there's a lot of money out there to pilot programs that could, just bring us up to par and be the big city that we are, the biggest city in New Jersey. I still feel like we are. We're not the second. And I think there's going to be a lot on workforce development with what's going on with our local and national economy. And that's something that I do in my day job. So I kind of know some of the information and facts that the city's going to be dealing with. So I really hope, and I hope to also be a part of it, not to see it, some vocational programs that help our youth, some pre-apprenticeships. It's been nice, and everyone that is working in City Hall and in the city, I am so grateful for all of the questions that they're able to answer, because I'm just full of, can I do this? Are we allowed to do that? What's the standard on this? So everyone answers my questions. I'm never embarrassed to ask them, and I'm so grateful. But we've been sitting down with all of the directors and leaders of each division and department under the city on their initiatives, their current budgets, and their staffing, and all of it just kind of comes back to raising a good workforce and keeping people who grew up here and maybe working here and guiding and mentoring other people. And I think that kind of would be like streamlined, and it would cross so many different divisions too. If you help develop a mentoring program and give an apprenticeship for GTW, you're also helping out the schools and the teachers, and you're helping out public safety, and then you're going to be, helping out people who have to look at construction code and give out tickets. So I think that those small little steps will impact a lot of different areas of Jersey City and a lot of different lives. So those are definitely on focus, not just for me, but for the city as well.
As always, it was quite the interesting interview with Amy DeGise, and you can check out the episode in its entirety by once again going to www.blogtalkradio.com/talkingtohudson. The episode is available anywhere at any time from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. I'll continue to bring you these exclusives every single week on Blog Talk Radio. And by the way, folks, as Talking to Hudson approaches its 5th birthday coming up on March the 1st, I couldn't be prouder of what this podcast has come to represent here in Hudson County, and of course to all the guests that have made it memorable, and of course to all the discussions we've had and the dialogue that we've created in the 5 years. I couldn't be more grateful. So to all my listeners and to all of you at home, thank you so much for making Talking to Hudson the success that it's become here in Hudson County media. And now let's move south to the Mile Square city of Hoboken. And once again, a special thank you to John Highness with the Hudson County View for his report on this story. And at the end of 2021, ladies and gentlemen, Hoboken residents all had a lot to say about a potential new $241 million high school in the Mile Square city. Now, this past week, there was a ballot referendum where residents were able to come out and voice either their approval or disapproval. And, we all know what the results were. So here's some details that make the story quite interesting. Now, the referendum opposition really was consisting of a lot of Republicans, some Republican organizations in Hoboken, some Democratic organizations, and even some unaffiliated voters as well, who all came together, and obviously they came out on the winning end here, to soundly defeat the referendum. Now, they will certainly run a full Board of Education slate, but the bigger question is, how far are they going to try to spread their wings in the Mile Square city? Another winner during this ballot referendum and the defeat of the $241 million proposed Hoboken High School was the Hoboken Republican Party, along with council people Tiffany Fisher and Ruben Ramos. Now, without a doubt, obviously they all expressed some opposition about the price tag, and rightfully so, folks. So listen, we all agree that Hoboken needs a new high school. It's an old building. You walk through it, the classrooms look kind of ancient. The hallways look kind of dirty. It just looks old, and it's a great high school, great tradition, great history in it. But Hoboken students deserve a new high school, but not at that price tag. So again, I'm all about fiscal responsibility. I'm probably much the only fiscal conservative that's doing opinion journalism in the state of New Jersey. But again, we look at those winners and, of course, overall Hoboken residents who came out in full force to demand more fiscal responsibility when it comes to the proposal of a new high school. Now, of course, there were some losers. Ultimately, the Board of Education, they were standing behind this, as well as Mayor Ravi Bala and members of the City Council that support the mayor at every turn. And even to some extent, some education advocates were sort of bitching and moaning this week that the defeat of the referendum did an immense disservice to Hoboken students, especially with the sort of what we see is coming in terms of potential enrollment and a student population that is growing. Not to say, folks, that of course, there are plenty of parents that send their kids to charter schools in Hoboken as well as private schools altogether. So the amount of sort of fake outrage and sanctimonious, despair by some education advocates, I always look at with very, very suspicious eyes. But it's a story that, is not going to go away anytime soon, folks. And whether it's people that are going to be running for seats on the Board of Education coming up this year, or just in general trying to make sure that the Board of Education is running with some sort of fiscal responsibility, well, hey, listen, there's winners and losers on every ballot referendum, and this week in Hoboken, obviously those who expect a little more, prudence when it comes to how we spend money in the Mile Square City, well, they came out on top. We'll see if that continues or if maybe there's some revisions. I don't know what the case may be, folks, but let me tell you something. It's a story that isn't going away anytime soon, and it's a story that we'll keep an eye on here on the program and also on the podcast, Talking to Hudson, every week on Blog Talk Radio. And that's our show for this week. To check out all the excellent programming brought to you by the leader in independent media right here in Hudson County, the Hudson Media Group, please go to their websites, www.hmgtvshows.com, along with www.livestream.com/hmgtv. You can also check out the Hudson Media Group on YouTube. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and, of course, follow them on both Instagram and Twitter. Don't forget to check out the 5-time award-winning podcast, ladies and gentlemen, Talking to Hudson, by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/talkingtohudson. I bring exclusives that nobody else brings you in Hudson County media, and I'll keep doing that, again, as we approach year 5 on Blog Talk Radio. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Professor Fernando Uribe, and follow this show as well at Talking Politics with Fernando Uribe. Hit me up on Twitter when you can, ladies and gentlemen, at NoFilterUribe, and don't forget to like Talking Politics with Fernando Uribe on Facebook as well. And always remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, it's always Talking Politics right here with the Hudson Media Group. I am New Jersey's premier award-winning journalist, Top 100 Latino, via Latino Spirit Online magazine for 2020, 2021, and now 2022, as well as the sworn enemy of all the local latte liberals, toxic progressives, social justice clowns, and all the woke fools throughout Hudson County, and yes, even throughout the state of New Jersey. Yes, it's me, Fernando Uribe, standing up against all of them. Thank you so much for watching this week, folks, and we'll see you here next week on the Hudson Media Group.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.